Hello and welcome. It's April 14th, and I'm so glad you're here with us. It is the year 2021, and this today is the third in a series with filmmakers from the film A Call to Awakening. It was a film that they designed or created, and we're going to talk about how, during this pandemic. You know, my husband was reading a survey with me yesterday. It was from the United States, but it was a survey about people that had been vaccinated and how free they felt after their vaccination. We would assume that in the States, people would feel a lot more free. But it was something like 40% of the people who have been vaccinated are still very afraid of getting sick. 40% as compared to 25% of the people who haven't been vaccinated. Now, I'm not going to get political about it, but what I'm interested in is the fear. I know many of us, and we started this series with the Alone Together series, gosh, back in March of 2020. And it was really to help you quell the fear of mortality, of sickness, of death. And I think it's helped a lot of us be able to create that resilience in our nervous system. But what this survey said, and I found it so sad, is that there are so many people that even the vaccine has not let them take their foot off the pedal of fear and to expand their awareness to feel free. So if you're one of those people, I want to encourage you to keep coming back. We're here every Wednesday. And what I do know about meditation is it will help to stabilize that feeling of freedom and safety right here, right now. That's really what's available to us in meditation is the sense of being okay and safe in this moment, regardless of the newscasts, regardless of the external world, is to resource the safety inside each and every one of us. So I'm really excited about today's program. I'd love for the filmmakers to introduce themselves. We have, and I'm not sure the order, so I'm going to let you unmute yourself in the order you like to do this. What our plan today is for you to meet the filmmakers again. We're going to play a short clip of the film, really highlighting the shadow. Many of us have been living with the shadow and do everything we can to keep it at bay, whether it's whatever that shadow may be for you. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to do a short contemplation practice, then followed by a communication circle. So if you haven't been in one of these communication circles, I'm excited for you to have the experience of it, whether you speak or not. And what we've found is it can be very it can be an awakening to your inner experience of what you feel and then how it's expressed, even if you don't express it. So I'm excited to see you here today. My name is Sarah McLean. I'm sitting here in Santa Barbara. I've been having a great week because I've been getting ready for our new teacher training program that starts a week from tomorrow. And we have about 17 new teachers that are coming into the program. So we have room for 3 more. And if that's you, let me know later. And so let's start. Which one of you filmmakers would like to share who you are and what that creative process was like? And did you meet or come in contact with your shadow? I know the answer is yes. Who would like to unmute themselves?
I can go first.
Great,
It's up to you.
Samir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, so my name's Samir. I've spoken a few times in the last few weeks. I directed and edited the film. Just a brief background. I wasn't a filmmaker for most of my grown life. I worked in finance and then in film finance. And then one day I had a Kundalini Awakening and it took me completely out of my comfort zone. And for a couple of years, I was experiencing very strange and interesting phenomena. And then I just had this calling to go into film school. So I went to the London Film School. I did a master's, still not knowing what was happening to me. And then I started making content. And it's only in the last year that I started to combine my spiritual awakening experiences with film. And it turned out through meeting serendipitously Katie and then Julian that these films came about. And it, for me personally, it began to synergize my experiences with the context of COVID, with this idea that actually we're all going through a spiritual awakening. There's a collective awakening happening, where your sense of reality shifts from underneath your feet. Now, the connection with shadow work, which is today's topic, is that my awakening process was definitely delving into my shadow. And I thought I'd done that prior to a Kundalini experience, but actually you dive back into it. And it felt that only in the last few years have I begun to be aware of this process and why the process is very, very important. I probably have a lot to say, and I don't want to say everything in 30 seconds, but what I would say is that my experience was that the shadow is something to not be afraid of, as long as we can contain it in a safe space, either with safe people or developing a sense of equanimity inside of ourselves to hold that shadow. That takes a lot of work, and it's not easy, but it's something that I began to develop through my Kundalini experiences. And then when I met Katie and Julian, I began to realize that the three of us have had similar, maybe different experiences, but we're coming to the same idea that shadow is quite an important part of this process, at least for us personally. And so as a filmmaker, weirdly, it was Katie actually who made sure we would put it in. It wasn't me, but these ideas began to come out. And but one of the most important ideas is that for this generation, our generation, shadow is our time. It's something we need to explore, because the world is creating safe spaces for us, even though it might not seem that way. There are people around us who can help us. Again, the film has come very organically. The people that I interviewed were already saying the same thing. Transformation is positive. Crisis can be positive. It can help us transform into something more, but it is challenging, and the challenging requires us to hold space for ourselves and each other. So I hope the films convey this, and you're going to see the same clip, I think, as we showed you last week, but in the context today of the shadow. Yeah, thank you.
Samir, and just for those of you who just are joining us, so Samir, you had mentioned Kundalini Awakening. I know that's a huge topic that you've been navigating over the years, but would you share just a sentence or two about that in a general or a specific sense, so that people understand? I know it's hard to understand mentally, but
so from the perspective of Hindu Tantra, or even Buddhist Tantra, Kundalini is energy that resides in the Hindu Tantra in our Muladhara chakra, and Buddhist in the stomach. And the idea is that if you practice ascetic meditation or yoga, you can release it. It travels up your spine, it unites with your crown, and you experience union between Shiva and Shakti. That's a very Hindu or Eastern experience. I feel that actually, if you look at Gnostic Christianity and Kabbalic Judaism, it's already in there. It's an indigenous practice. It's not solely, even though I'm Hindu, it's not solely a Hindu phenomena. It's just codified in these texts. But the idea is that there's a union that can happen with our energies. What I feel is that our generation, again, the people of the 20th century, 21st century, are going to have spontaneous awakenings. And it might not be framed as an energetic Kundalini experience. It could be NDEs, it could be experiencing it on the dance floor of a club, or playing sports even. It could be anything. It's a unifying experience that can help us grow. So Kundalini specifically is this energy, but I think that there's a wider narrative in the world, the idea of union with oneself, which yoga means union. So I don't know whether that explains everything, but I think it needs to be demystified. The problem is, at the moment, it's very Eastern and esoteric, and hopefully one day we can bring it down to the ground and make it a bit more grounded and less spiritual, maybe.
thank you, Samir. Yeah, it seems to me that sometimes we use the language that can be exclusive for people when they don't understand the lingo and they don't know what we're talking about. But it is, you'd mentioned, and I know we don't have tons of time, but I just have a quick question about when you have this Kundalini awakening or this experience of expansion, it lights everything up inside, doesn't it? And so this is where you came face to face with your shadow, or shadows, depending. Would you share just a brief bit about that?
I would say that the misunderstanding about Kundalini Awakening is that it's an event, it's a process, and it takes years, and you might be experiencing it and not even know it. And there isn't, and the key is not to objectify it or try to seek it. it exists, and if you try to seek it, you attach yourself to it. So the phenomena itself can give you experiences of non-duality. It can also give you phenomena of spontaneous movement, mudras, spontaneous pranayama. That's the Eastern aspect. But all of these are distractions. The important thing is not to get attached to any of these phenomena and to experience it and then let go. The difficulty that most people tend to face is that they get attached to the process and they can create an ego and think they're enlightened. And I think a lot of gurus have had Kundalini awakenings and they think they're enlightened, but the process goes on and on and on through lives. And I think the people who are definitely awakened don't need to talk about it that much, I would say.
Right. Thank you for that and sharing that. We had a question in the chat. Sue asked, I was taught many years ago that Kundalini energy exits via the ears. Have you ever heard that?
No, the traditional theory is exits on the crown up here, but there is another theory with certain other esoteric tantra, it comes at the back of your head. I've never heard of it exiting via the ears. There's a lot of new development where people talk about it exiting in different places, and maybe for them that's the case. I wouldn't know about that. In my experience, I felt like molten energy just move through, like hot energy around here. So for me, it's always been around here.
Thank you. And I know once we start talking about it, it becomes conceptualized, and that can make it completely unobtainable. But what I do want to share is the word Kundalini means serpent, and it's the full name of it is Kundalini Shakti, which is an energy that's in every single one of us. And as you meditate, you really allow for it to move spontaneously, and that's the key. It's spontaneous and unplanned. Just like transcendence, the more you want it, the more difficult it will be to obtain it or have the experience of it. Thanks, Samir, for sharing that. It's a deep subject, and I know some of you are fascinated by it. And but it's a energy. It's the difference between being alive and not being alive. That's the Kundalini life force, and it has wisdom and intelligence, and it's gentle yet extremely powerful and potent. And you can't make it happen, and sometimes you can't make it go away. So, yes, you're right, Samir. It's been written about in the saints, the levitating saints in the Christian tradition, and it's really a fascinating topic. But we're not on that topic today. We're on the topic of the shadow. So, who else would like to share? And thank you, Samir. Katie, would you like to share?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Oh gosh, so much good stuff. I don't know what to say, where to go. So I said briefly, I think last week, my history is, or my work history anyways, in psychiatry. So I worked in psychiatry in various roles for 15 years and didn't hear anything about the shadow, knew nothing about this stuff until the repression of my own kind of hit me and catalyzed my own spontaneous awakening during a meditation due to crisis. So my crisis was initiated through a suicide attempt and kind of near-death experience because of that, around 12 years ago. And I'd been working in mental health services. Now I'm very aware, trying to deny my own shadow, trying to deny my own trauma, trying to kind of fit in with societal norms, which don't allow for shadow, which don't allow for those. So just to say as well, if in case anybody doesn't know what the term shadow means, it's an archetype, a human kind of trait in all of us that Carl Jung coined the term, the shadow, the psychiatrist Carl Jung. And it's the thing that we kind of deny within ourselves and collectively as a society through shame and through kind of, as we've become more so-called civilized as a society, we're taught to repress our human traits such as sexual impulses, murderous impulses, these things that actually we all have, we all experience as humans, and need to process and integrate. You know, we have to be a good girl, be quiet, all of those things that kind of make us repress those sides of ourselves that want to express themselves in and can be expressed in a really healthy way. So yeah, so I experienced a crisis which catalyzed the unearthing of all of my shadow, everything I'd repressed in myself. And how I like to see it now is those things that I'd denied were my wounds. So I think an important part of the shadow is that, you know, we repress things, we disassociate from those aspects of ourselves in order to survive, and they're not bad. I think this is a real misunderstanding when it comes to shadow work. The shadow is seen as bad, and the more we try and deny it, the more it projects out into society, and we see it in figures who are really egoic. Gosh, I'm jumping all over the place now, but I'm reminded by Samir, something you said about, you know, gurus, spiritual gurus, but something that I really realized during my own awakening process, which was absolutely the start of doing shadow work. It was not being enlightened, it was the start of doing this work, which will continue till the day I die, I'm sure, was that I realized everything that I'd learned working in mental health services was kind of paradoxical, because insanity was the real journey to sanity. And a lot of the people on the wards were in what we would call the Messiah complex. So saying they'd had some kind of an opening, some kind of an altered state experience, and they were saying they were Jesus or they were Buddha. And that makes complete sense to me now, because we connect with this universal consciousness when we have these experiences, but some people can get stuck there if we're too afraid to dive into our shadow and look at our wounds. So you asked, Sarah, one of your questions was what have we experienced in making the films? And I absolutely have unearthed another level of shadow within myself during this film process. I actually experienced a really challenging time last summer where those suicidal thoughts started to creep back in. But because of the work I've done on myself and the practice to be a witness, I was able to kind of step back this time and think, oh, that's interesting. I don't want to act on these thoughts. So why am I experiencing this? And realizing that was an aspect of myself that no longer served me, that needed to die. It wasn't that I wanted to die. I needed to let go of that wounded part of myself that was no longer serving me. Yeah, so it's been a massive growth process. I try and practice whenever I'm triggered, and I watch aspects of myself happening in other people to kind of recognize what that is in myself. So we're all mirrors of each other. Why am I annoyed by that person's behavior? Because it's something within me that still needs to be healed. Yeah, so much that has kind of really been helped and highlighted through making these films. I think it's been a really humbling process, and Julian and Samir and I are trying to create the safe space within ourselves, within our team, to allow ourselves to kind of delve as deeply as possible to do this work, because speaking about this stuff isn't easy, and we can only speak as far as we've done the work in ourselves. So yeah, hopefully today we can practice a bit of that safe space sharing.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you for being so honest. And so what I understand you saying is one way that you kind of integrate the shadow is by really allowing it to be there and witnessing it, almost dialoguing with it. Am I getting that right?
Yes, I think last week, Sarah, you mentioned personifying our emotions, and that's something that I've definitely practiced. It's kind of welcoming, hello anger, hello sadness, kind of why are you here? What's your message for me? And kind of recognizing that, yeah, these emotions that we experience are messengers for our healing. They're part of a healing process. They're not something to be denied. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with us, which was what I was taught during all of my years in the mental health system, which is actually the opposite of now what I now believe.
You know, somebody once said, what you can't be with won't let you be. I mean,
Mm.
what you can't be with, the shadow parts that we'd rather not look at, you know, slapping at the bumper sticker on your car, at least I did, that said, it's all good when it wasn't.
Oh yeah.
You know, all of that won't let us be. And it
Yeah.
comes out sideways. And there's even such a thing as a collective shadow, which maybe you've sort of seen here in the United States, expressing itself as we aim to, you know, be good or whatever it is we're trying to do here. But it's really about loving the totality of our humanity. I mean, all of it, the fullness of it. It's not just the good stuff. And as a Maharishi Mahesh Yogi once said, you know, let's not mood make. Let's not pretend it's all good when it's not. And that's not enlightenment, right? So
Right.
thank you,
And
Katie.
that's what causes a huge split within ourselves, which can then manifest as what we call psychosis, because
Yeah.
we become so separate from ourselves. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Well, as you're listening to Samir and Katie, and we'll hear from Julie in a moment, you may be recognizing there's a part of you that you don't let people see. For me, as a public speaker, I went through speaker training with one of the best shadow work people that I know, and I was good friends with her, Debbie Ford. And I got up in front of everybody and started to speak as a trainer, becoming a meditation teacher in 1993. And she said, "Stop right there, Sarah, because what I couldn't be with wouldn't let me be. What I couldn't be with was being imperfect." So she had me get on my hands and knees on the floor and bark the entire speech like a dog. So, you know, that really, at this point now, imperfection is totally fine with me as long as I'm not barking. And even then I'll do that too. But that's sort of what we're talking about is letting that part of you that you're trying so hard not to let anyone see, or that part of you that you would rather not be, at least awaken to it in your own awareness. And that's where the sanctuary and safe space comes in. So thank you, Katie. And so Julian, would you like to share a little bit about your insights, your filmmaking, your creativity, your shadow?
Great, yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I think I want to start from the collective shadow you mentioned. I have a professional background in cultural theory and aesthetics, and worked in academia for quite a while, and understood what was really always drawing me to the subject was to understand the collective shadow. Been working on a research project on suicide, on genocide, and on all kinds of kind of cruel aspects of culture, also on madness and exclusion and othering. This was always what was very fascinating me, because I always intuitively felt that if I want to do cultural theory, write papers there and succeed there, I need to understand also the shadow side of culture and professionalize this in quite a way. But at a certain point, reached on my personal development level borders with just intellectualizing and theorizing about it and writing academic papers, and realized it didn't translate to my personal development. So at the same time, I kind of left academia to work more in the field of transformative activism and get into a really, really toxic relationship that ended up on many levels quite violent, and I absolutely refused to see it, because I thought intellectually I had understood I had understood it all and had it all together. So I really had to start to look at my own shadow and not at the collective shadow, and learn levels through meditation and mindfulness practice and yoga, and through sharing in safe spaces and having dialogues around it to really explore my personal shadow on a deeper level and from the inside and through practice and not through the mind. And this is something that really I understood on a deeper level while making the films and while being in the inquiry and the process with Katie and Samir, that it's really that it's something that the mind can't gather or can't fully gather. I'm sure it helps. It's one side of it, but really the deep listening practice that I did with the interviews, hearing it over and over again, and then practicing with Katie and Samir to hold a safe space where we really feel we kind of can openly share, and at the same time being a professional project together and making this happen, it's been really has been a great experience. And we really try, as Katie also mentioned, and Samir, we try to translate what we're doing in the inside to the outside and the other way around.
That is really insightful, Julian. Thank you for sharing so deeply and honestly. And yeah, creating that safe space. I know any spiritual endeavor, any that any one of us goes through, whether it's writing our book or setting up a program or, you know, journeying in this world of self-awareness, it will be like a washing machine for our stuff. And it's great to work with others who are committed in that way. That's that power of community, which we all are here. And you know, whether we know each other well or not, there's this ability to bump up against each other to see ourselves. And so thank you for sharing that, Julian. I know some of us I know that we want to know about your third film. I know you're working on it. I'm curious as to what it is. The first one's called The Awakening, which we're going to see I think we're going to see it from a clip from there. And then there's The Call. And then the third is The Vision. And I know you're working on that. Samir, would you share a little bit about how people can support you or what that's going to be about?
Yeah, so when we were making the film last year, there was so much great information coming out. It felt that just making a film about individual and collective awakening, which is what the first two films are about, wasn't enough. That was setting a framework for something that would happen in the future, or was beginning to happen now. And so this idea of a vision for the future began to gestate in me, and I've begun to interview other people now for what would have been a third film. I think it'd be a third and fourth film, both to do with a vision for the future. The first is about our evolutionary template as human beings, what's happening to us inside of us, how consciousness is, how our individual consciousness has potential. And the second film is about social and political change. And the relationship between the two is that what I've begun to understand is that our subtle systems, our energetic systems, can be mapped out in our social systems. That if we have blocks in our systems, then our political systems will have blocks. So the two films represent the inner and the outer, our internal consciousness and our external consciousness mapped out in social and political systems. And where we can go, be it health, be it education, but also technology, how we can grow as human beings and where we can go. So what I'm hoping to do is create a series of films that will give us a framework for where we are now and then where we can potentially go. So that's what's being generated this year. And don't know, Sarah, can I mention the GoFundMe?
Yeah, please do. People want to support your work. We've only seen a little of it. I put some links here in the chat for anybody who wants to go and watch some of these films. They're free and available to watch right now.
We want to make the films, they are free, then they'll always be free. So it just takes time. It's a lot of interviews to do. So we just have a GoFundMe page on the website. So basically, I guess what we hope to do is create a series of films that will be free to watch around the world, free seminars, Q&As, and we just hope people can support us. So that GoFundMe page is linked on our website, and I think someone will put it up in the chat.
Great, thank you. Katie just did, so great. Thanks, Samir. Would you like to introduce this next film clip I'm about to share?
Yeah, so some of you may have watched this last week, so apologies for the repeat. Last week we talked about safe spaces. This week we're talking about shadow work, and the section in the first film actually was about both, because I see the two is linked together. Shadow work requires safe spaces. So this section or this clip of the film is about creating safe spaces and about how to then go into our shadow, what the shadow is, and how to explore it safely.
Great. Well, hopefully I'm techie here and you can hear it. So let's watch it. We're watching a few minutes of this, about almost 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I think really the work at the moment is what the Jungians would call shadow work.
Trauma is felt and stored in the body, and it's forever seeking a way to be released and a way to be voiced. This old suppressed pain is just wanting to be heard.
The shadow in Jungian analytic psychology are all the aspects of the self that we have denounced, the things that we are and we think we're not.
We have to embrace our emotions fully in order to integrate that fragmented part of ourselves, in order to truly have compassion for ourselves and for another.
This is old trauma that is wanting to be released, and if we project it onto another, then we're just perpetuating the same cycle.
And we can only hold space for another person at the depth that we have gone to within ourselves. Doing this deep work expands our capacity to be compassionate to another's healing.
I'm very much into creating safe spaces where people can authentically speak from their heart, to be able to voice all your emotions.
Where people are supported to be able to have a time out and to reflect on their life and connect with themselves.
And so how to create an environment that's open and inviting.
Find someone who you know you can be true with, that isn't going to judge your emotions as something that needs to be bypassed or transcended.
You provide maximum freedom, but within a container of maximal safety.
So if we were to be able to create a space and have different kinds of experiences that would allow the human being to begin to imagine what is it within them that they could change.
But the benefits both for ourselves and for the world as a whole are potentially paradigm shifting.
It's nice to hear it again. So thank you. So as we talk about this, I'm sure that some of you are feeling that part of you that you can't be with, that won't let you be. And there's talk on this film, and as we've all shared, about creating safe space. In my experience, I basically went into a Zen monastery for a couple of years and really suppressed a lot of what I was feeling, and sat there and watched my breath and counted my breaths for 2 years. And then we had the opportunity to sit in a circle, and it was called a communication council practice. And so for me, just sitting in a circle together with all of you can be the way in which we can be with what's going on internally. Now, I'm going to guide us into a meditation that will create that safety within, because even though you may be feeling that you don't want to share, and you don't have to, there's a safe space inside, that sanctuary in your heart, that we can connect to and explore, maybe ask what wants to be heard, what part of me needs some voice. Quite often, there's a practice I do that I'm going to share now. It's a simple one. As I walk through the world, I often say, well, there I am. There I am again. There I am, pointing to whomever is driving me crazy or making me thrilled. There I go. Here I go. Because quite often, as the simple adage goes, when you're pointing at someone, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. And this is just the beginning of becoming aware of the shadow. What is striking you out there that you might need to, and literally striking you like an instrument might set another string of an instrument to vibrate with it. That's what this is. So we can sit in some meditation for a little bit, and then I'm going to post a few guidelines if you'd like to be in circle. I'm wondering if we want to break into a couple of breakout rooms so that we, maybe Katie, would you want to be in one of the breakout rooms, and Julian in one of the breakout rooms, and Samir, and then me, so we could have 4 breakout rooms? I'll go ahead and put the guidelines, and we'll just spend a little time in there. The guidelines are about being safe. Safety is primary. You don't have to say a word. You can even leave if you want to, or sit and listen. None of this is going on Facebook. We are going to stop recording now.